Hey, welcome to another episode of Becoming a TechnoWizard. On this episode, we're going to talk about service design. Ooh. Specifically, well, basically, I'm building my portfolio. I finally get into writing the rest of my case studies instead of, just getting stuck on trying to perfect one. Bad choice. But yeah, so for my other case studies, one of them is going to be another school project, but the third one, usually, your third one's going to be like your weakest project, like another school project or a personal one that's not kind of unfinished or anything like that. But this one, I want to take what I did at my job and turn it into a design case study. Now, I'm going to make it clear that, I wasn't a designer or anything like that. I didn't know anything about design when I started this. But the reason I'm doing this is because number one, transferable skills is extremely important. A lot of us have these skills that we've learned in various other job functions and everything like that. So when we're transitioning careers into a whole other career path, we don't want to start from zero. We shouldn't start from zero. We should take the skills that we gained in those other spots, in those other areas, those other functional areas, and bring them to the new career. So that's what I want to do here. And the reason why I want to do it as a service design case studies because um, when I was looking through different jobs and everything like that, I found Frog Design. They have their design agency just as good as IDEO, if not better in some aspects. They worked on like Apple's original brand design from the 80s and everything like that. The whole uh, I forgot what we call it, Snow White design or something like that. They worked on, Microsoft's digital design system. They worked on GE. They worked on Disney. All these big names, as well as a number of other things before and after that. That range everywhere from industry design or industrial design rather to digital and stuff like that, brands and everything. So when I was looking at their job postings, they had a whole area for service design. And I was like, I never heard of this before. What is service design? So I looked it up, and apparently it's a big thing. Like this is actually really important. Service design is essentially, um, as it sounds like, you're designing the services. Like you're architecting, you're creating what I don't want to use the same words in the definition, but service design is essentially, in my own words, um, creating the entire customer experience of what really it doesn't even have to be a customer experience. It's really creating the entire holistic experience of what people are how people are interacting with your brand and your company. And the reason why it's not just customers is because a large part of service design is focused on the employee experience, on how the internal processes of your business is working. So, because if your business functions like a well-oiled machine on the inside, then you're almost definitely going to provide better customer service on the outside. So that's why it's not just focused on customers. It's also focused on the internal. And during my experience, at ICME VR, that's basically what most of my job was. How I became a manager is working on an operations manual, creating an entire. It ended up being like a 90-page manual on how the business works, right? And during that process, I was able to vastly improve a lot of our processes and systems. I was able to increase productivity. I was able to help increase the positive reviews, our ratings, from around 150 to like 500 reviews. I was able to help simplify our POS system, our make our website better, make our customer service better, make our product better, and all these things through this operations manual. So I said, I'm thinking like that's pretty much service design, right? I mean, I'm ignorant of the fact, so maybe I might be wrong. So I'm gonna talk to my instructor. Fortunately, he's sick right now, so I'm gonna have to talk to him tomorrow, and he'll hopefully be better. And hopefully, I didn't do all this in vain. And like he agrees that this is a good thing to use for for service design. But even if it's not, even if in the small chance that I'm completely off base and this is not service design, I can still put in my case study as a case study, because I think it does a good job of showing the type of skills and the type of process that I would go through as a service designer. So hopefully it is truly transferable. But anyways, um, I wanted to take I wanted to do this video to help me process um, service design. So I'm going through the Nielsen website as well as interactiondesignfoundation.org um, in order to get a good idea of what service design is. And in so doing, I found two things that I want to, basically try to practice with in this video. The first part, it says how to do service design best, and it says identify 5 vital parts of the encounter. So number 1, you got actors, which are employees delivering a service, or just anybody that has that's interacting with the service. And then location, it's pretty self-explanatory there, but wherever the service is happening. And then you got props, which is anything that people use to interact with the service. And then you have associates, which are the kind of third parties that have that aid in that service. So it could be logistics or anything like that. And then you have processes, which of course how you deliver that service, the workflows and everything like that. And then on interaction.org, it says you need to define problems, iterate, and address all dimensions of the customers, users, and business needs best in a holistic design. So I looked up holistic design. They have a link to it, and this has this nifty little info chart. It says 7 points of holistic design by, I don't know how to say this name, but just look it up. I'm not sharing my screen. You can't see it, but Yves Behar, Yvesbehar. So 7 points of a holistic design. First part says start by asking questions to put a problem in its holistic context, and then improve the functionality to meet holistic goals. After that, there is create your own theories or adapt theories borrowed from other disciplines. And then you have examine the entire customer lifecycle from marketing to disposal. You also have consider other business models, and then strive for projects that seem impossible and aim to deliver on them anyway. And finally, find what you want that everyone else wants, be a game changer, and meet unmet needs. So yeah, they go a little bit more into detail to it, but I wanted to take these two ideas, like the 5 pieces of service design, along with this 7 points of holistic design, and try to work through what I did in my job, and hopefully that will help me to really flesh out this case study. So I'm pretty much making my own case study. I'm just coming up off the top, not really off the top, but I'm making my case study in a chronological format instead of following either of these methods, because I feel like that just makes more sense to me, and I can tell a better story that way. Um, so my own case study, I have the overview, then I have prior problems, where I identify all the problems that was already happening in the business. Then I have auditing operations, which is my process of how I analyze every piece of the business to understand, what was going wrong and why. And then suggesting improvements, which is, as it sounds, basically giving solutions, but not like, hey, this is the solution. More like, we should improve on this. And then I have taken the lead. I'm not sure how I might reword that, but it's basically part of the project where I became the leader, where I, became, where they had me take ownership of the entire project before somebody else was leading this task. But about halfway through, I started leading this, and that completely changed everything, because when somebody else is leading, I can't tell them, we need to work from scratch because this is not working at all. I had to, like, be what's the term, diplomatic, say, hey, we can improve this part by doing this, and I would give them actual suggestions. So I wouldn't just come up with problems and drop them on his lap. I would, give him the solution too. So they don't feel like I'm trying to take over or anything like that. But they left. They left the project, they left the company, everything like that. They wanted to do something else. So that I'm including that. I want to include that because that was a major shift in how the project went. And then I have change in scope. I'm not sure if I'm going to really put this part, but this is in relation to how during the project, initially it started as like a franchise manual, right? Where we wanted to franchise a business, and so doing, we needed to create an operations manual to, make it franchisable so that people can, pick up one of these things, create their own arcade under our brand. But during this process, we realized that wasn't really the move. We wasn't going to be able to do that, and all the other examples that we've seen before, they were systematically failing. So we saw that the marketplace wasn't really ready to franchise, for an arcade franchise. So we had to change the scope from creating something that was going to be external to creating something that's only internal. And that again reflected a big change in how the project went. And then finally the outcomes, which is, the results and all that stuff. So yeah, that's how my case studies laid out. But I think going through these problems, going through these outlines, I guess, how the interactiondesign.org and Nielsen website, how they laid out service design, I think that will help me to how to frame my thinking and to make a more effective case study. So let's get into it, because it's I hear thunder and it's about to rain out here probably, even though it's sunny, but I don't know, Georgia weather. Anyways, let's go. All right, so the first part, so actors. So the main actors on the employee side, they're of course, our employees. But our business was kind of unique. It's not like it wasn't a typical arcade where you just had the owner and then, a bunch of customer service people who were just, working the front desk. It was more of a startup where we had a technical side to the business, like our owner and our the founder and co-founder, were technical people. They were Georgia Tech students, and so they were trying to build, code bases. They were trying to build a unique technical stack, I guess you can say, to our business, so that we can later, be more appealing in other ways. But so the actors weren't just like all employees. It was specifically front desk employees, and their, our duties were, interacting with customers face to face on a daily basis. And then I guess you can say from the other side, the other actors were, well, I'm trying to see. So for service design, should the actors only be the employees, or should it also include the customers? Sure. In service design, you work within a broad scope, including user experience design and customer experience design. To design for everyone concerned, you must appreciate the macro and micro level factors that affect their realities. Multiple channels. Yeah. I don't know. I have to look it up. I'm gonna stick with that so far, because most of it was looking at from the employee side, but we still had a number of places where we looked at it from the customer side as well. And then location. So our location was definitely the arcade, but you can also have digital virtual environments, where customers receive the service. So one part of that location is actually in the headset. So the actual product of our service was when people put on the headset and they can play games, that was the product. So that was part of the environment as well. So that's kind of a separate location from the physical the physical arcade. It was the inside the headset, the virtual environment, literally. And I'm not sure if you can include the website, because you weren't really getting a service there, but that was where they bought the service. People can buy their basically they can make a reservation. I was going to say buy tickets since it wasn't tickets, but you can make a reservation online. So I'm not sure if that counts as the location, but I'm going to include that anyways. at least a auxiliary, but still important. And then the props, objects used during the service delivery. So the main prop was, of course, a headset, the whole virtual reality headset. I mean, whole virtual reality set. So that the gear, I guess you can say, that include the headset, that include the controllers, as well as the space, because you can't really play virtual reality without space. Um, you could sit in a chair and do it, but it's not fun. At least not as fun. So our space was a 10 by 8 foot uh, station. We call it a station, and it's kind of like an open-ended room. And so you had one side that was open, and the rest was kind of like a box. So you can walk around and you can hit a wall. But two or three of the walls were like foam boards or something similar to that, so that when people run into the wall, and they always did, they weren't hurt. They didn't hurt themselves, at least not often. um, so that was the major props. And then you could count like the auxiliary props was the keyboard, mouse, computer monitor. That's what people use to like the um, spectators used to see, what was going on in the headset. They looked at the monitor, and sometimes, we let them choose their games for them through the monitor as well. Then you had associates, other organizations involved in providing the service. So that was the game licensing partners. So people mistake this all the time, but I don't know why. But they think we created all the games at our arcade. I mean, it's an arcade. You would think, you get these games from somewhere else, but I don't know. So yeah, a major partner for us was our game licensors. So we often had to communicate with these people directly and ask them permission to get these games, set up, licensing terms and all that stuff. Then I think that's the main other associate. Yeah. Um, like for other arcades, you would include the game license. I mean, the game launcher itself, because they actually most of them, license their game launcher uh, from other people. Like you can't use. For those that don't know, arcades is very interesting. Virtual reality arcades. There's a number of places. I'm not going to get too deep into it, but just for this point, um, basically we run our games through a launcher, right? These games have to live somewhere on the computer. It has to if you don't directly communicate with the licensor, like the actual game studio, then you have to communicate with somebody like Steam or, that's what you think. So for computer games, when you buy a computer game at home, you usually probably going to buy it from Steam, or nowadays you have Epic, the publisher, and you buy the game from there. And that's the game distributor. That's what I meant to, the term I'm looking for, game distributor, right? That's who you get your games from. But as an arcade, or as a commercial venue, most of these studios aren't really dealing with people directly, aren't really dealing with the business directly, because another business in the arcade, setting has popped up, which are the people who are basically game distributors. Springboard, and Springboard was really the biggest one, and then you also had Synthesis. So these popped up fairly early on in the arcade, VR arcade business. So they became the people who talked to a bunch of game studios and got deals en masse, on at large, and then they distributed these games to other arcades. So you would pay that distributor, for access to different games that you were running your arcade. For us, one of the things that made us different was that, again, we had a technical team, and so they wanted to, our founders wanted to build their own distributed, distribution platform. And that's pretty important, because even though it didn't go anywhere, we were actually one of the first ones to have a game launcher. So most arcades, they just bought the license off of Steam or something like that, and they played it directly, or they illegally bought consumer licenses, consumer versions of the game from Steam, and then they launched it right off the computer. So users, the customers, will put on the headset and it will see a Steam menu. So if you don't know, Steam is not very user friendly. At least wasn't before, and at least not for people who are not like usual gamers. If you don't play games very often, Steam is not user friendly. So this is doubly so for people who came into our arcade who are playing in virtual reality, right? And they never played virtual reality before. They don't know anything about this stuff. So when you put them when they put on the headset, you give them, you show them a menu, they get very, very confused. They don't know how to use the controller. They don't know how to navigate through the menu or anything like that. And so, when the arcade started, our founders wanted to develop a immersive menu. So something that you can walk in, and instead of seeing like this, 2D menu screen, you saw like a table. It had like buttons on it. You could press a button to see the game, and it would like show a video and all that stuff, and you just hit play. So it's very tactile, right? You go out, you can press buttons and everything. It's very fun, very tactile, very intuitive, or at least engaging. um, so yeah, that's another important part. So I wonder if you can say if our founders, if they were kind of like the associates because they developed, the game launch system. But anyways, way off base there. I'm not off base, but um, took a long tangent there. But uh, hope you got informed about the business. And finally, you have processes. So we had a number of processes. At least we did in the end. The problem in the beginning is that there were not very many processes. Is that so on the front desk side, when people came in and you started, you can talk to walking customers, or people called and you talk to them on the phone, or if people order something online, we didn't necessarily have a set process for what happened in those in any of those communications. So if somebody had a question, right, we didn't really have a set answer. The people working there we just knew the answer, right? Like because they worked there. Um, the business started and around 2017. The founding team, they were developing it probably since 2016, since like December 2016 or something like that. They launched in May. No, in April. Was it April? I think it was April. Yeah, April 2017. And then and near the summer, they hired a couple other people. I was hired in August 2017. So I was hired a couple months after everybody else. And so whenever people called, they would just like know the answer. So they would each have their own ways of saying sort of the same thing. Um, but the problem with that, and I'll get more into that, later, is that it's just confusing for customers. Like you would tell one customer one thing, and then, or maybe, one employee will tell the customer one thing when they called. Maybe that customer will call back and speak to a different employee, and that employee would tell them something different. It wasn't like the employees didn't know what to say. It's more like, they had different ways of saying the same thing. But that could be confusing for, customers who had no idea what was going on. They just wanted a straight answer, right? And so if they hear different things from different people, they're gonna like, oh, they don't have their stuff together. Um, so that was super important for like big events, for people doing parties and all this stuff. Oh my, you got all these gardens. This bee's coming after me. Got all those flowers up there. That's why I moved down here. Anyways, so yeah, that was a major process. Another process is troubleshooting. So when something went wrong, something always does, especially with new technology, um, there wasn't a set process for troubleshooting. Again, this stems from the people that's there kind of knew their technology. A lot of them were technical people. A lot of them were like from Georgia Tech or from I think um, Gwinnett Technical College, or whatever the local college was. Um, so a lot of them, just knew what to do. They knew how to troubleshoot. Sort of, they knew how to sort of. It's not like they knew troubleshooting steps, but they knew like logically what to do to work through a problem, right? To get it solved. They can Google. That was like a big thing. Like, you saw an error, you Googled it real quick and said, okay, this is how I can fix it. But again, each time like an error happened, you will Google it. So it could be the same error, but if it happened like a couple weeks or even or a month later, you have to Google again because you didn't really remember the error. And when something went wrong, maybe you took out the headset or the controller or whatever, and half the time they didn't tell anybody else what happened. So somebody else came after them, they wouldn't know what was done there. The problem was that there were not a lot of processes in place where they should be processes. Another one was cleaning. Think this is a very simple thing, but when I came in, I was doing most of the cleaning. Um, that that was sort of unfortunately a sort of result of having having very low a lot. I mean, not very low, a lot of downtime. In an arcade, because the only real or the only direct responsibility that you have being hired as a receptionist or a front desk person, whatever. We change the titles a lot, but the only real direct purpose you had was to help customers when they came in. But when there were no customers, which happened a lot because VR is still new, people didn't know we existed, stuff like that. It was very quiet a lot of times, so you had to figure out stuff to do. A lot of the other employees, they were working on like the website or the technical side, the platform, all this other stuff. So I was often given the cleaning. I had to clean a lot of stuff. Um, I didn't mind it so much, but it got to the point where when we started hiring more people, you know, and I had work, I by then I already gave myself a lot of work, like for instance, working on the operations manual. And so, I saw that, it was going to become the new employees' job to do all the cleaning. I was like, I don't know if that's a good tradition to set in place, like just to have the new employees do mostly cleaning, right? And so we knew we needed a process, or eventually I came up, I told them, we need a process for this. Another problem with that was that sometimes things would not get cleaned, right? Like I only knew to clean things that people told me needed to be clean, like bathrooms, the floor, stuff like that. But sometimes there were things that you didn't expect you had to clean, like at the top above the stations, you would have cobwebs that get there, or behind the stations, between the station and the wall, um or like really like nooks and crannies that eventually, if you didn't clean, like the spiders would be there, then they would come out, and you didn't want to have that, right? um and there were other things like just making sure cleaning there were enough cleaning supplies, and making sure that you know if I wasn't working, things were still getting cleaned. So I would work maybe 4 days of the week, but over the weekends, it gets super dirty because of all the parties in place. They have a lot of parties on the weekends, and if I didn't work that Tuesday, because we were closed on Monday, so if I didn't work that following day, then half the time it wouldn't get clean, and you couldn't have it dirty when customers come on Wednesday, stuff like that. So it's just small things like that, but they add up. They add up. And finally, another one was inventory. So we didn't have a lot of inventory, but we did sell like drinks and snacks, as well as again cleaning supplies, and extra supplies for the arcade, like so for controllers or headsets or cables, anything like that. That became a huge issue later on, cables. But suffice to say that we didn't really have a set process for making sure that things were stocked up. So yeah, there we go. Actors, location, props, associates, and processes. So now let's look at this from a holistic design. All right. So first, you want to start by asking questions to put a problem in its holistic context. So I definitely asked a lot of questions in the beginning, and even like later on, asked things like how does the point of sales service work? The point of sales hardware, or not hardware, software. Why am I- It's not me. It's both hardware and software. How does this whole thing work, right? So when people order online, how does it work when we need to when people call in and we need to order for them through the software? How does that work? Why are there these different listings? Because on the back end there were a lot of listings. They were like private and not private. They were you know special listings. They were 2 hour, 3 hour, all these different types of listings, right? And it got confusing because you like, what's going on. And then another problem was that the owners they were often doing advertisements and ad campaigns, but the software was limited to the point where in order to do a campaign, you had to do a new listing. Because if you did a campaign with like 20% off, right, for a limited time, you would have to create a whole new listing with that, and that will live in the same place as all the other listings. So if you're just doing a regular customer, 1 hour, for one station or whatever, uh, that will live in the same place as all the ad campaigns. And so it started being like 20, 30 listings on the back end. And that was super confusing for me and for the employees that was already there, because they were like, are we doing a new discount, are we doing a new event? They didn't know what was going on. So I asked a lot of questions about how the POS system worked, about cash. So we had to really pay attention to, when people order things. I mean, not order, but when people came into the arcade and they got food or drinks, we had to take their cash. And again, the POS system was limited, and we couldn't take credit card, because the POS system charged like a ton of money, um, at least relevant to the price. Like they charge like a set price of like $1 and something and 38 cents or something like that. But if you're selling candy for like $1, it it we're losing money on every sale, right? And so we were just gonna do cash. Um, but that was confusing because now you had to kind of balance of what was in the cash register, versus because the cash register only only took the cash register was connected to the POS system, and the POS system was only for bookings, for reservations. So if you put money in there related to food or drinks, then your cash would be off, and that's not good. Then you're confused. You don't know if people are stealing. You don't know if if we were stealing from customers, not giving them the right change, and so on and so forth. So that's another thing I asked about. Asked about troubleshooting. What do these different things mean? So we use the HTC Vive on our in our for our virtual reality headsets, and HTC Vive. Oh my gosh, it was one of the best ones when we first started, but it had a number of problems, number of like not very user friendly stuff. Like in order for you to figure out what's wrong with the HTC Vive, you have to pay attention to the little blinking light. It would just blink, different colors at different speeds, and you had to like look up this stuff. Eventually, Steam had error codes that were a little bit more accurate, so you can look up these error codes. But even that was like not super clear. Um, so I would often ask about all these different codes and why we had different problems, like why tracking will go out. So for virtual reality, you have these headsets and these controllers, and have like little um, infrared sensors on them, and that will bounce the signal from the base stations, which shot infrared light to the controllers, to the headset, and that's how it tracks you. So when that light hits the controller or the headset, it can track where you're moving. So if something went wrong in that process, the controller will go flying off, or the headset, the station, like the your view in the station will get tilted, or even worse, like the headset itself will like fly around and stuff like that, and people would get dizzy. Um, so whenever anything like that happened, I was like, whoa, why did this happen? What can we do to fix it? What can we do to eliminate this problem? Because it was a very, very bad problem. If anything technical happened, that's when you would almost definitely get a bad review. So we had to make sure we stayed on top of these technical issues. Another thing was game problems. So I asked a ton about games. That was the fun part about working in arcade, is that you can play these games. That's a part of your job, is playing these games. Not when customers are there, but like before or after or something like that. Um, and the first like week of training is playing games, because if you had to know about the games, if you did not know, how these games worked, then you couldn't help customers. So I played the games myself, asked about different ways of beating the games, different modes, and um, all this other stuff. So that helped me to understand more about that. um, but yeah, asking these different questions definitely allowed me to view the problem from different viewpoints, from the employee point, from the customer point, from the owner point, all that stuff. So that was pretty cool. Okay, so I need to speed this up because storm is about to come down, and I don't want this video to be super long. Anyways, you got improve the functionality to meet holistic goals. So yeah, definitely this is, I guess, solutions sort of. Um so some of the first one of the first things I did was what is the first thing I did? I don't know. I did a number of things. Okay, I don't know which one was first any longer. I have to go look back at uh, the time, the date stamps, and everything like that. But some of the first things I remember doing um, was creating a sort of guide for what people should say when they call. Um, and this was really to help me at first because I'm not a very confident person, so I get very nervous when I'm talking to people. So I have to go over things over and over and over in my head to be comfortable with them when it comes time to talk about it. So I created a kind of like it wasn't exactly a script, but was a guideline to things I should make sure I cover when people call. So talk about what we do, how we do it, what VR is, um, all that stuff, and leading to the price. Um, in that process, I actually was able to. Dang, it's raining already. All right, this is not good, y'all. Just gonna scooch a little bit more under this patio and tough it out because I really want to finish this. I'll speed it up. But anyways, yeah, that's one thing I did. Create a guide to make the to make communicating with customers more efficient. Um, Also created a troubleshooting process. So um, helped create like a labeling thing so they could label, whenever we moved controllers or anything like that, or tested them to see what was wrong with them. I created wrote down all the error codes that we knew of, and all the problems that happened, and kind of created a spreadsheet or matrix to pinpoint, what are the most likely problems to happen, and how often they happen and why they happen and stuff like that. And from that, we were able to determine that most of the problems that we had actually came from the cables, because the virtual reality headset, the HTC Vive, used 3-in-1 cables, an HDMI, a USB, and a power cable, all in one cable. So if anything happened, if like that cable got twisted too much, which happened a lot because people were moving around, then typically the first one to go was the HDMI cable. But you couldn't replace that because all three of them was in one. So we ended up buying a new HDMI cable, and that was one of the biggest things that that helped us for a long time, because a lot of other arcades, they had the same problem, but they didn't know why it happened. So they would spend a buttload of money buying whole new equipment when really it's just the cable that's the problem. Or some people would know it's the cable and will buy a whole new cable, but that cable was expensive, like $60 for a cable. But all we had to do is buy like a $10, $15 HDMI cable, and that solved the problem. Um, so that stemmed from making sure that we had an actual process for troubleshooting. Another functionality that we improved was inventory. So we actually took stock of everything, kept count of it, set, and then put a deadline or a timeline of when we should restock. And when it's down to this amount, this will only last us, another week. So this is when we restock, not when it's actually out, because we don't want to be in the middle of a party and then people are like, "Do you have plates?" And we're like, "Oh shoot, we're out of plates," right? You can't have that. That we had to, can't have that. So we improved that as well. Cleaning, create a spreadsheet, simple spreadsheet that said, every 7, 14, or even 5 to 3 days, clean this thing, and we put a name behind who cleaned it. So that way you can keep track of when things were being cleaned, how often, and who all was cleaning things. So that way you can reward people and stuff like that as well. And then create my own theories, adapt theories borrowed from other disciplines. This is interesting. I'm not sure if I did this. Actually, I did. Because the troubleshooting process that actually came from my I never really had a job as a customer, as a technical support, but I was sort of trained in that in my time at Europe. We went to, because that part of that was getting an IT certification, and part of that was troubleshooting. That's a big part of IT tech support. And so I looked up, some of the best processes for tech support, and they had like 7 things like communication, blah blah blah, documentation, this, that, and the other. So that's basically what I did. I just took from those disciplines and put that into ours. Oh yeah, actually yeah. So for the customer service thing, that came from sales. So we had a sales process. Um, uh, Yeah, and a couple of jobs I did, like my first job out of high school, as well as my last job before the arcade. I was basically in a sales related job, and in those sales, you have a guide, you have basically a script or a guide, talking points, the things to cover uh, during the process, and that made sure that you were consistent. That made sure you were confident when you're speaking to people. That made sure you were always covering, you know, the the right stuff. And so, I basically copied from that, and that's how I got the customer service. I'm gonna fly through these because it's really coming down now. Um, examine the entire customer life cycle. We definitely did that. Another interesting part for this is that we created we um, I I'm gonna take ownership for this, but I heard about Superhuman's product market fit, their survey, and I took that survey and I used it for our arcade, and that helped us see a number of things. That helped us see the different types of users that we had. So we had, people who are new to arcades, people who always came with like a group, people who, just came by themselves. We had these different types of users, and so we were able to, see what each type of user liked the most about our arcade and liked the least. And so we were able to optimize our services based on, each of those customer types. So we looked at everything from, we asked ourselves, how did they find the arcade? So I went through a whole process with every single customer that came in or that called. I would ask them, how did you find out about us? What led you to us? And that, helped us a lot in determining, how people found out. Most of it was just like I was just searching for things to do. Sometimes people would search for arcades, but usually it was just searching for things to do, and we popped up on Google, or we popped up on Facebook, or we popped up on TripAdvisor or something like that, right? Uh, and so we made sure to optimize those specific ones. People said, when they were looking at different arcades, because at this time we were the first arcade in Georgia, but in our time, like 2 or 3 other arcades popped up, one in Atlanta, but 2 of them in the same city that we were in. We're in Georgia. Like, this is a huge place. Atlanta is pretty big, and all the other arcades, except for one, or at least the big arcades, were in our same vicinity, within 20 miles of us. Like, they knew we were here. Like, they went to our arcade and they started their own arcade, but they both closed down eventually. So we outlasted them, but that was a tough time for us, and we had to make sure that we constantly looked at, how do we set ourselves apart? Because when people looking for things to do, and they find out about virtual reality arcades, they're not looking at your name. They're looking at virtual reality arcade, and they just go to the first one that pops up on Google. But we were able to stand out with our reviews. We had the most positive reviews consistently. We still do, to the point, like, even across all of America, and maybe across the globe, we probably have some of the highest, most consistent reviews out of any arcade in the world. And it's weird because, like, we're not like a super big. We don't have funding. We don't not a lot of funding. We're at a disadvantage in a lot of ways, but even with other arcades who have more reviews from us, like, we have, I think, 300 or something Google reviews, and other arcades might have like 400 or 500 Google reviews. I'm not counting other ones like Facebook, TripAdvisor, Yelp, all that stuff. But other arcades might have, 500 Google reviews, but then they have a 4.0 rating or 4.2 rating, right? Or even worse, like a 3.8 or something like that, right? But we've had like a 5 or 4.9 rating for a long time. Then we got kicked down, unfortunately, to a 4.8 for some mess. But even now, with over 360 reviews, we have a 4.8 rating. And that is significant. When you look at any other virtual reality arcade in the world, not many of them, maybe a handful of them, might be where we are. So I count that as a win. So yeah, consider other business models. We looked at a lot of other stuff that we wanted to do. Um, so not just so our current business model is basically charging people when they came in, when they reserved, and they can play as many games as they want. That's like the business model that we started with, and we were thinking about shifting it because other arcades, like our competitors in the same city, they often did like crazy things, like pay like $10 and then you can play 3 games. So it seemed cheaper, but people realized that this was very confusing. It was a very confusing business model to when you say, hey, you can only play X amount of games with X amount of time with X amount of money. There's too many variables for people. So we stayed away from stuff like that. There were other models where you paid like uh, a premium for an exclusive game that you can only find in arcade. But that was difficult because it was hard for us to get deals. Because even though my like part of my job was actually getting deals, getting licensing deals, and I was able to get a good amount of games before other arcades got them, but that just it wasn't sustainable. Those businesses like Springboard and even Steam, they started taking their uh, PC cafe thing more seriously. So they were, cutting down on that stuff, and you got people being bought out. Like Beat Saber was bought by Oculus and Facebook and stuff like that. So we just couldn't compete with these sorts of things. So we couldn't really get like exclusive games that were really good. There were some people that had like exclusive games, but they weren't really good. So that was unfortunate. But yeah, we looked at other business models, but we just couldn't really find anything that was better. So we still ended up sticking with the same one. Strive for projects that seem impossible and aim to deliver on them. Um, our biggest project that seemed impossible was the game launcher. So, like I said before, a lot of other arcades, they do have a game menu where you look at a screen, you look at a Steam menu, and you just point and shoot to select. But we wanted an immersive experience. So when people came in, um, they were immersed into this other world, and that serves several purposes. One, that taught people about VR, because that was a big thing. Is like people don't know what VR is, even to this day. A lot of people don't really know what VR is about. Number two, that allowed us to have a basically stand out with our competitors. So when people came to our arcade, they would know, this is a different experience than anything else that they've ever had, because they as soon as they put on the headset, they saw something different. They were immersed into a world, right? And number three, which is probably the best and the most memorable part for customers, is the multiplayer aspect. We strove to create a game launcher that was multiplayer. So as soon as you put on the headset, you saw your family, your friends in the same virtual experience, the same virtual space. So even before you started a game together, people could be talking with each other. People could be just playing around with each other, right, in this virtual area. And this really made the arcade experience more engaging. Uh, and it was interesting because we started this before Discord was really big. Um, Eventually, Discord got to a point where everybody was using Discord, and even arcades started using Discord for voice chat. So that kind of took some of that out, but we still had that unique factor in that when people came into our arcade, they can instantly see their family together. So this was really good for big parties, because instead of people trying to having to yell through the arcade like, "Hey, I'm playing this game," they could just look at each other like, "Hey," they can talk in that same virtual experience. And so we ended up building an entire we call it a space station. It's not exactly it's close enough, right? You have like an internal area, you have an outside like kind of like patio, and it's overlooking the earth. And that people love that so much, right? They go to the edge of the platform and they look down, and it's the entire earth, right? And it's just like, whoa. And that's how you know you got them. They put on a headset, they look around and like, whoa, right? And so we were able to deliver on that. That was pretty cool. And so it's like space all around, and you see stars, you see the sun, you see the moon, you walk and you see the earth. And then we made it engaging. So you can go to like a control board and grab a planet and put it in there, and it would change the entire environment, and they would see another planet, you see Jupiter or Saturn or whatever. People love that so much. Um, there's like spaceships that you can launch around, so you can walk up, press a button, the spaceship launches, and just explore. There's like a chalkboard. People just love, or a whiteboard. People just love writing in VR for some reason, but it's a whiteboard. People just writing funny things. We had a target practice area, so people could grab a gun and shoot. But yeah, we just had these different parts that made the experience more engaging. Now, I'm gonna be honest, it wasn't nearly as engaging as we wanted it to be. Like, we still are trying to find ways to improve it, because a lot of times people go in there and are like, all right, where are the games? Right? um I mean, understand that, but there's we know that there's something lost when you don't get to interact with people before you get into a game. Because all the games are different, right? We don't have a say in how those games get made, and some of those games are very confusing. A lot of those games are not very intuitive in terms of how you play together, like how you set up the multiplayer lobby. So we wanted to make sure that people didn't instantly go into like what's the term, cognitive overload, where people were instantly like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing here, this is too hard for me. That was a big problem, because a lot of our customers, again, they did not know what VR was, and so if they wanted to play together, they're like, oh, I have to press all these menu buttons at the, they were just, it's just very confusing for people. So we wanted to make sure it's easy, and that meant when people put on the headset, they saw each other, they communicate with each other, they can get into a game together. Unfortunately, we couldn't really figure out how to make a shared menu system. So when people, right now, how it is, people press a menu button and then their menu pops up, and that menu is instant. It's just for them. That's unfortunately, it's confusing for people, because they're like, "Oh, can you see my menu? Can you, they try to point to a game." Uh, so we're still trying to find a way to make that possible, because that would greatly, simplify everything and make it that much more better. But in the end, we did, strive for something that was seemed impossible at first. And finally, find what you want that everyone else wants, and be a game changer and meet unmet needs. So yeah, this is interesting. I'm not sure what to do from here. I think one part of that was the game launcher. A lot of arcades wanted to create custom games, because licensing can get expensive, right? You pay like 10 cents for the more expensive games. You pay 10 cents a minute. So every minute that the game is played, you're paying 10 cents to the developers. Um, and that came out of your profit. So the profit margin is already very low, because you're paying for like all this equipment, you're paying for rent, utilities, and all this stuff. And then on top of that, you have to pay, developers for the content. So a lot of arcades wanted to develop their own custom games, in-house, or get some developers to develop it for them, and then they can have their own exclusive game. That will help with marketing. So you can say, hey, we're the only arcade with this really awesome game. That will help with engagement, customer engagement, and longevity, because you can constantly increase it. You can have like a tournament for your game. You can have an esports type of thing. You can do special events and prizes and all this other stuff around that game. And also, uh, uh, like I said, it will reduce your costs in the long run, because now when people came in, they played this game, and it was essentially free to play, right? For you, like, you weren't paying when people were playing that specific game. So if you can have a number of games, or just one really really popular game that you didn't have to pay for, that was like, everyone wanted that. So we try to develop that as well. We try to turn our launcher into a game, to where, maybe you grab like, we had a target practice area, and we turn that into a mini game, so you can shoot and you can get a high score, and it would be set on a leaderboard. So we try to turn that into a regular game. um, we were thinking about doing the other parts, like getting into a spaceship and flying around, but unfortunately, vehicles make people very, very sick. Or at least most people, they get motion sick. So that's hard to justify, especially when most of your customers just aren't advanced users, and the advanced users usually get their own headsets eventually. Um, but yeah, that was probably the main things. I'm not sure what else we did. Oh, yeah, another thing we wanted to do was that no one else did, but everybody wanted to do was create a oh yeah, I'm sorry. People did do this. Okay. The void. So um most people that hear about VR nowadays probably heard of the void or something related to it, like Disney, like Star Wars, right? Play Star Wars. They probably heard, you can play Star Wars in VR. And that comes from the void. They're owned by Disney, or at least they were founded by Disney executives. Um, or LucasArts or stuff like that. So they have people there who have tons of resources, and they were able to create like a warehouse scale type of game. You put it on the backpack, and you can like be involved in the Star Wars world. So you can walk around, touch things, you can interact with things. You have a whole storyline and everything like that. So they have exactly what people all the other arcades wanted, and because they were able to spend millions of dollars to accomplish that. We did not have millions of dollars. So we wanted to kind of turn our arcade into that. We tried to have like LED lights that would change colors when people did certain things, or turn on a fan, or have heating or other stuff. But unfortunately, none of it really worked. We're still working on some of that. But when the pandemic hit, that really took a large hit out of our resources. So not even sure if we're gonna really be able to pursue that, but we still have a number of I need to drink some water. We still have a number of ideas in that realm of how to make the experience more interactive and more engaging. But yeah, that's the main stuff right there. This is a cool process. I hope you learned something. As always, I hope this made sense from a service design standpoint. And I think it's going to help me a lot when I put this into my own case study. Whew. Going to go drink some water now, and yeah. Thanks for watching once again, and let me know if you have any questions. um, Let me know what you think. Have a good day. Bye bye.